We are very aware that grief is something every person will face and does face. Yet, a lot of us do feel unprepared when it arrives. In this episode, a licensed trauma specialist shares how to support someone in grief, how cultural differences shape the way people mourn, and how to talk about death with more honesty and care. Trauma-informed care. It's very important.
Very, very important. We're going to be exploring what trauma-informed care looks like in our everyday life, why grief is not something to fix, and how small things shift in language and presence can make a meaningful difference. Whether you are supporting a loved one or working in a caregiving or creative field, or just navigating your own loss, we hope this conversation will offer you guidance and that you can use. We will be discussing 1. How to support someone who is grieving. 2. Trauma-informed approaches to grief and loss. 3. Cultural differences in grief and mourning. And 4. Finding meaning and presence in everyday life. This episode is for anyone who wants to show up with more clarity, compassion, and confidence in the face of loss. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I am the Reverend Mother Ana Luisa Armendariz, and today we get to meet Ashley Buchner. Ashley is a nationally licensed clinical social worker. She is licensed in 37 states. Wow. Wow.
That's
Art
impressive.
certified trauma specialist, grief and loss expert, and a multi-state clinical supervisor with over 16 years of experience across trauma care, addiction treatment, crisis systems, clinical supervision, and organizational consulting.
That's great. Wow.
Wow.
I'm the Reverend Wakil David Matthews. Oh, that was Ana Luisa, by the way. I don't know if you said that at the beginning. Anyway, we were glad to hear from Ashley. She got in touch with us and asked to share about trauma-informed care, grief and loss, ethical practice, clinician burnout, and how systems, not individuals, drive many of the challenges facing mental health today. She's passionate about making complex clinical topics accessible, honest, and deeply human. And we're really glad to have you on today. I was looking down through your website and such, and also see that you work with teens. I think that would be fun to talk about. So we want to hear all about all of this stuff. Yeah, welcome.
Yes, well, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, and here we are intersecting in the 21st century, talking about death and dying and all these things. But what inspired you to begin this work?
I think what initially inspired me was I worked for hospice. Well, prior to that, even I did a lot of volunteer work for hospice, and that really started me on this journey of realizing that people don't talk about loss and grief and end of life. And so I really expanded that. I actually began to work in hospice, worked with that in my own family, and then became a certified end of life doula. And then do a lot of work around not only end of life but living. I think that's very important. So that's a deep passion.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you tell us more about the work you're doing and kind of currently what you're working on? And the whole. I did notice when I was reading through that the word art. When I saw art certified trauma therapist or trauma specialist, I thought that was about making paintings or something, but that's actually an acronym. So maybe you can tell us more about that
Absolutely. I own Anchor and Rise Therapy and Anchor and Rise Academy, and we not only do therapy across the country. I'm currently licensed in the 41 states. Sorry, that changed over the weekend. So 41 states and have the other 10 licenses pending. And so that allows me to be able to meet people wherever they are, literally, as well as therapeutically. And so we also do a lot of education around, we're trying to start some death cafes where we talk openly about end of life and what this looks like in grief and loss. And the thing that inspires me is that there's so much grief and loss in the world. And I find that it's such a taboo subject, especially in the South. As you can tell, I'm from the South. So people really don't speak about these things, and not only do we not talk about grief and loss and death and dying, but there's often a lot of I think there's a lack of discussing how we live too and what that means, and really having control of your life your whole life. So um, I work in those spaces of really just educating the public, educating therapists. I mentioned that I'm a clinical supervisor. I really educate my supervisees to work with people on grief and loss, and that doesn't just mean loss of life, right? That can
Mhm,
be where
mhm,
the movie version of our life doesn't look like the reality version. And so, um, really working in those spaces to make the uncomfortable more comfortable, and
Mm.
that is a big passion of mine. And my family kind of hates it, but I'm the person at Thanksgiving that says, how are you living your life? Are you happy with it? Do you have anything
Mm,
that you would change?
I
I think
love
people
that.
wait so long to live, and um, there's such a fear. And
Mhm.
Mhm,
I really kind of open that conversation of what does it look like to live with very little regrets. I don't think any of us have no regrets, but to live with very
mhm,
little regrets and to live our life to the fullest. So,
Mm. Yeah, very nice. Yeah. That's great. I mean, I was just it's funny because Annalise and I talk about that a lot, how when we go to dinner parties, people are expect to hear from us eventually. I went out to, lunch yesterday with my family. It was from some of my family, and sure enough, my wife always kinda rolls her eyes because she's like, "Okay, you finally got around to talking about death and dying," and and I'm telling my, 21-year-old granddaughter, "You're gonna die too, you should get your stuff together,"
I always do, yes. And I apologize. I didn't answer one of your questions. You mentioned ART or accelerated resolution therapy,
Yeah,
and I completely forgot to
that's
answer
alright.
that question. So my
Thank
apologies. Accelerated resolution therapy has been an amazing game changer for me personally and professionally. It is an eye movement therapy that really works with so many things, but trauma. It works with the physical symptoms of uh, of trauma and loss and things like that. It also is great for chronic pain and ADHD and um, depression and anxiety, and I could go on and on. And that has been just a remarkable thing. Not only do people not have to continue to retell their story, which
Mhm,
is beautiful, and but it also allows, the therapist and others that are trained to not get that secondhand trauma, that
trauma.
compassion fatigue, and so it's really beautiful. I actually speak on it across the country.
Mm,
Recently, I was accepted to go to a conference in Belize to speak on
yeah.
it, so I'll be doing that in May. So I guess now internationally, I do, speak on accelerated resolution therapy and the impacts of being able to do one session and have amazing results. It doesn't take
Mm,
any of the realities away, but it just takes away those physical symptoms and is an absolute game changer for people when especially in grief and loss. I found that to be a really beautiful
mhm, mhm.
beautiful way to work with individuals.
wow, beautiful, thank you.
That is, yeah, it's a really, and I've never heard of that, and I'm now very, very curious.
Yeah,
And
Amazing.
also, it makes me realize that, I mean, Wakil and I talk to a lot of folk and, in our personal lives or communities, and there is such a resistance to discussing either the quality of life that you're living or the absoluteness of you going to die, right? Like, it's a very,
Absolutely.
and, it for me, I frame it as a mental health issue when people don't wanna talk about it.
mhm,
And I think it is a trauma issue. I didn't realize, like, not talking about something could also become a very traumatic, kind of, like, shameful feeling around, like, it's scary, grandma died or my best friend died,
Right.
and, how do I reconcile my personal living with death?
yeah.
And so I
Absolutely.
kinda I kinda like that. It's like everybody needs it.
And
Yeah,
and also, where I grew up, especially, in the Bible Belt, you don't talk about things because then you speak
mhm.
them into existence, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
it's a very taboo topic to talk about not being here. So, I really love
Right,
to open up those conversations to say, "This is an inevitable," how do you feel about it? But also, how do you live
right,
until we get to that point?
right.
Mhm, mhm,
It's also, and I'm gonna, when I was in seminary, I had to do my practicum, and I ended up writing an advanced care directive planning book. and I housed it kind of through spiritual direction. So I started out as a spiritual director, you know, kind of talking about your spiritual life and
Mhm.
then talking about death. And I have to say, a lot of folks who are Christians, because I only had Christians, I had a few, other different, but not many, but they're terrified of hell.
Hmm.
They're terrified of dying and having gotten it wrong and going to
Right,
hell, and so I was like, "Wow," like, that's why you don't wanna talk about dying, it's
right,
because 'cause you're afraid that you're going to hell.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I hear
yeah.
that a lot and see that a lot, and then what happens is people and I've sat with numerous people, not only personally, but professionally, at the end of their life, and there's such a fear around that, not only for
That's
that
right.
individual, but for the family, and then,
Yeah.
there's not been any discussion, so families are having to make decisions that we don't know if someone was okay with, and then we don't so it just
Yep,
creates this
yep.
cycle of
Trauma,
unspoken,
yep.
uncomfortability that doesn't
Mhm.
have to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Wow. Sounds like we're working on the same stuff. That's so
Yes.
great. Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
Would you say there are, uh, well, what are I guess what are the biggest challenges you face when you are reaching out? And I'm very fascinated too, because neither of us are from the South. If you can speak maybe to some of the cultural differences from the place that you're from. Maybe that's part of the challenge is, as you said,
Mhm.
people are afraid that they'll speak it into existence. That's a really interesting, and we've heard that too from other people,
Mhm.
not just the Bible Belt.
Right.
uh, you know, so I think there is that feeling. I wonder if there's other challenges you face or other things that you would say are specific to
Definitely,
the South.
a lot of cultural over the last few years, I've moved to different parts of the country, and I find that grief and loss is managed we know this from a book that it's managed very differently, but I actually saw that in person. I've,
Mm,
lived from, Southern Florida to, near Mexico and California, West Virginia, all the way up to near Canada, and I find that so many groups deal with grief and loss differently,
sure.
and, um, I think recognizing the cultural differences is very important, really listening to people and finding out what their fears are, talking to them one-on-one is
Mhm.
so helpful. um, I find that people are actually really open to talking about things one-on-one to a stranger,
Mm,
but
Mhm.
in our own tight-knit families, we don't wanna talk about it because it makes it real.
mm,
Mhm.
yeah,
We don't ever want to consider what life would be like without mom or dad or husband, wife, grandma, grandpa, things like that, children. So I find that I can create a safe space where they may not feel comfortable talking about that in their family. And so that's a challenge, but also an opportunity that I have
yeah,
found is that
yeah.
people do want to talk about these things most of the time, but they just don't want to
Mhm.
talk about them with their family because
Mhm.
it's just very taboo. Um, I also think that sometimes people are worried about what it means, for their faith
Mm,
if they talk about it, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
I do have these fears. I do have
Mhm.
this, and, um, I find that a lot of people also don't want to talk about it because they have so many things left that they wanna do. I
mm.
find and this is one of the biggest tragedies of life. I feel like people put off their life and put off things that they want to do, and I've sat by so many people that said, "My regret is that I didn't," instead of
Mhm.
what I did do, the regret is
Mhm.
what they didn't do,
Mhm.
and, the reality of, "Oh my gosh, I've put off my life for so long for X, Y, and Z reason, and I have all these things I want to do," that seems to be a challenge for people. So I
Hmm.
really kinda spread this idea that we have one life and
That's right.
we have to live it, fully, and that means all the way from if you want to travel the world doing that, but also advanced directives, right? Like, having
Mhm.
control over your life your whole life. I
Mhm.
find that a lot of
Mhm.
people don't do that even though we're in a free world, so
Mm,
it's
Mhm.
a
mhm.
it's a barrier.
Right, or just being honest about what you really truly want and not being ashamed of the choices
Absolutely.
that you're gonna make, right? Like, in terms of death and dying, like, I just had a conversation with my father a few weeks ago, and there has been such a taboo in his mind to be cremated.
Mm.
And then he's like, "Well, but, if I'm dead and you have to decide, like, you're gonna do whatever you want." And I was like, "I actually don't care. Like, if you
Right.
don't wanna be cremated, I'm happy to, like, schlep your body to where you need to be. Like, it's not that problem." But there is, like, there is this intimate choice making that you have to trust somebody with. And if
Absolutely.
you're not and if you're not brave enough, or you have somebody who is sturdy enough to hear and see who you are, then it does create barriers to being honest about what we want.
And it
Mhm.
creates
So
such a trauma for people as well. I work with so many people
mhm.
that say, "I don't know if my family member, my loved one wanted this."
Right,
Mhm.
right.
And this and so they're living with this trauma of, "Did I make the right
Mhm.
decision?" Because the conversations were never had.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, so true.
So, what frightens you about the end of life?
I think for me, the fear is, well, it used to be that I didn't do or say the things I wanted to. It used to
Yeah.
be.
Right?
Um, and I say that because my father passed away very young. I feel
Mm.
like it's very young. He was 56 years old, and I think the biggest loss for me was all the things that he didn't do or didn't get
Mm.
Mhm.
to do.
Mhm.
And I sit by so many people that have that same fear, and so now my family probably thinks that I'm absolutely insane.
Yes.
If I told you some of the things that I have done recently that I am so proud of, but my
Mhm.
mother's probably shaking her head. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
I just want to make sure that I do the things, say the things. So I am big on that. No matter if my obituary is in 50 years or in 5 minutes, it will be amazing. And I'm very proud of that right now. Very, very,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
proud of.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, yeah, just looking at the amount of letters behind your name is like, "Whoa, this person does a lot of different things and a lot of work." I would love to hear some of the tell us some of those wonderful things that people will be surprised about. I think that would be fun
Absolutely.
because
So
it'll
I
also help people understand kind of examples of what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So some of the things that I have decided when my daughter graduated from college or from high school, pardon me, I decided to buy an RV. I've never been in an RV, but I decided I was going to buy a new RV and I was going to travel the country. Which, by the way, is much more fun in the movies than it really is. I have too many shoes for this. I have way too
Yeah.
many shoes to live in an RV, but I did it, and I lived all over. My husband and I, we would, when we were living in New Mexico, we would park and we would walk across the border just to have lunch.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I lived in, as a very Southern girl, living in northern Minnesota and North Dakota was a very big deal. 10 feet of snow and negative 50 degrees, not my bag, but I saw the northern lights there. And so I had to buy a house there, right? That meant
Mhm.
something big. And I take these trips, these surprise trips. I took 2 last year where I don't know where I'm going until I get to the airport,
Hmm.
and they're
Who
out of the
who who buys the ticket?
it's a company, it's a company
Oh,
called Journey, and you answer a questionnaire, and then you just kinda show up,
that's
and then
so
you
Oh
cool.
my.
it's so
I
cool,
love
and
it.
I travel all over the country, and I gave up, um, my very secure, what I thought very important job, um, with all the stability because I was sitting in church one day, and I was actually praying, like, I have no idea what something happened in our family, and I thought, I don't know what happens next, but I I know I can't continue, 100 hours a week and all these things, and I just kinda heard, "Anchor in your strength, rise in your purpose," and I'm not a very creative person, so I knew that was not for me, and so I opened Anchor and Rise Therapy. Um, I I taught belly dancing. I'm a certified scuba diver. I ride motorcycles. I have my motorcycle license. Um, I started paddleboarding, and I'm
I
pretty
love
clumsy.
this.
So all of these, I
Perfect.
probably could list like a million more, but I just have the best
Mhm.
time, and I'm
Mhm.
so happy in my life. And I feel like, again, no matter how long it is, my obituary is
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I love that. I I try to live that way. I have a kiddo who's sickly, so she kind of tethers me home a lot more than
Yes.
I would like to be, but I say, like, "I love everything you've done. That's
Thank you.
good for you for living."
And my daughter has a medical condition as well, and so, um, she kinda looked at me maybe a couple years ago and said, "Mom, I'm not like other people," and I said, "No, you're not, so let's live your way." And so
Mm,
um, we just have the best time. We just came back from Mexico, like, a few days ago. That's why I'm kinda sick. I was on a cruise dancing with everybody, so
Uh-huh.
I just live this life and it has nothing to do with money I spend. It is just meeting new people and having new experiences and truly just living my life without
Uh-huh.
any regrets of missing
mm,
anything.
mm, mhm.
Mhm. I love
That
that.
yeah, that does bring up something, though, that I think is important for us to talk about here, and that is that, 3 of us maybe, have the I'm sure you work with people who, don't have the, um, resources to just decide to take a trip, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
and I wonder what kind of work you've done with those folks to how does that work for somebody who can't afford to
Mhm.
maybe can't afford to get dinner today, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I, so one of my favorite cases was a child that I worked with. Um, and it forever shaped me. This child, their biggest goal in life was to, watch their siblings open Christmas gifts.
Mm,
It was the summer in Georgia,
mm,
um, but they knew that Christmas probably wouldn't come for them,
uh,
and so, we focused on the things that like, we focused on going to the local park because you know what? People live all around amazing things that other people travel for, and they never
right.
take part in those,
Yeah.
um, so taking family pictures, something that's big.
Mhm,
I do a lot of legacy planning with my clients, and so writing those letters, and not because we're anticipating the end of our life, just because there's things that we need to say and do.
yeah.
If there's
Mhm.
something you enjoy, like I sat with a friend a few weeks ago just so she could teach me how to knit and crochet.
Hmm, mhm.
Um,
Nice.
these things that don't cost anything that are living. That's what living is, right? Is making sure that when you wake up, that at the end of the day you could say, "Gosh, I'm really, really proud of what I did." And for me, some of those things are just like looking at the ocean. I'm
Mm,
right by
Mhm.
it, but often we're too busy
mhm,
to
mhm,
spend that time or to hear stories from our family and what their life was like to make new friends and to turn on a song so loud and just dance like no one's watching you. Um, that's living, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that's really things that I focus on, and the trips and things that I've moved to, those have just been recent things, but my
Mm,
life has to do with the everyday and
yeah,
making the
yeah.
most out of every moment.
Yeah, very good. I love that. And
Yeah, and oh, go ahead,
oh,
Joaquil.
I was just gonna mention the fact that I love what you said about, um, next door is something that people would drive to. I mean,
Right,
I live
right.
next to the, Salish Sea here with mountains on all around me, and Ana Luisa lives in Colorado with mountains, and I often will go out to the beach and think, "Wow, people travel thousands of miles to have this
Yeah,
kind of a view,"
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I just want to go back to Joaquil's question about, we have means. The three of us have means. We are so privileged with our financial pieces that we do get to have adventures and drop
Absolutely.
everything and go, right? So I want to recognize that somebody listening to this may be like, I work two jobs, I have, family members to take care of. And for them, it just occurred to me like I think as a community at large, you know, bringing life and light into other people's
Oh my goodness.
daily things
Yes.
should be the impetus for us to make sure like people may not have access to everything that others do. I mean, we don't have billionaire access for sure.
No.
And they're not doing anything to make sure like they're helping our day to day, but we can do that for others. And I think that is the gift that I hope I can move forward and like Are you living the life you want? Maybe somebody's be like, "No, I'm, like, tired, I'm poor, I'm hungry, I've got sick kids." It's like, how can I step in and help you? How can I
Mhm.
move in
Absolutely.
and say, "I'm gonna take you every to lunch," right?
And
Like, or whatever, but giving them that little piece of life love would be great.
Yeah,
absolutely, and
yeah,
the story, the biblical story about of the woman that gave what she had, and I think
yeah,
that's beautiful, like, when we help people with our means, whatever those are, and they don't have to be financial.
Right.
They could literally be that you can teach someone to sew a button, and that means so
Mhm.
much to them,
Mhm.
or you teach them to make a new recipe, or,
Right.
you share you're like, "Hey, let's read a book together, let's go to the
Mhm.
library together and
Mm.
discuss it at the end of the month," like, that's life. It's not
Mhm.
the
yeah,
travels and all the things, it's the connections that we make and the impact that we leave.
That's
yeah,
right. I
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that. That's really so important, and really, I think for anybody that's, getting up in the morning and thinking about what can I do to be helpful to somebody today? What can I do to
Absolutely.
raise somebody else's life is something that's going to help. It's going to make your life better, and it's going to be,
Mhm.
that's frankly my goal of life.
That's the
What I look
legacy
for.
we leave behind.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. What else do you wish we'd have asked you? I guess would be a good question to finish
I
up
think,
with.
when I was looking at your podcast, the thing that just kept, coming to my mind was having these open conversations
Hmm.
about what
Hmm.
life is, what end of life is, what grief and loss is, and our world is just consumed with grief and loss.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah,
I think that is
so
Mhm.
many ways.
bypassed so many times, and so I always come with the grief and loss perspective, and I tell people when I meet with them, whether it's personally or professionally, that I work a lot with grief and loss, and the thing I hear is, "Well, I've lost so and so, but it's been a while." And I said, "Well,
Mhm.
again, grief and loss is so much more. Um, it's when our hair doesn't look the way we thought it would." And that might sound crazy, but that impacts people, and I don't just mean the hairstyle, when our health is not as good as we thought it would be, when, our finances are not what they thought it would be, when our relationships are not the way that we thought they would look.
Mhm.
Just overall, the movie version and the reality version being very different, that's grief and loss, and I just think having an open space to talk about that is really where
Mhm.
we feel as
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
society.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad we can offer that here, and glad that you're doing that work that you're doing,
Yes.
and, um, is there any other I was gonna I think we also usually like to find out what kind of things you do yourself when you're feeling like you're overwhelmed, and you've got a lot of different therapies that you've worked with. Is there anything that you would recommend, I guess, to our audience?
Absolutely. So I keep a gratitude list
Mm.
and I add to it every day. And I want to say this, there is no gratitude too small. I encourage my clients laugh at me, but especially living in Florida now, I will say deodorant. Small, but if we have that, we are thankful, and I kinda laugh about that, but you know what? I think sometimes people wait for something to be big enough to be thankful for it, but to be thankful for the very small things is
Mhm.
amazing, and so I update that list. If you saw it, it's pages long, and not
Mm,
because I am very blessed, I don't mean it like that, but just because, if we have clothing to put on or,
mhm,
we have a roof over our head or we have deodorant or we have a toothbrush or we have food to eat today, um, maybe one person that we can call because we don't have to have
mhm.
5. We just
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
even the one, um, to have chapter friends, and when I say chapter friends, you might not tell them everything, but these may be the people that you like to read with. These may be
Mhm,
the people that you like to talk about politics with, whatever works. Um, but chapter friends and maybe your faith. And so I really kind of ground myself in that gratitude list. That's
mhm,
really important to me. I also need to step outside once per day.
mhm.
Just
Yeah.
need to realize that there is life out there and that the world is still moving around, even though there is grief and loss and hurt and shame and regret and all these things. There is so much life
Mhm.
that is still out there to be lived, and that's the way that I ground myself. Um, Prayer is important to me. I read, and just so you know, I am big on music, and I think
Mm.
I can dance probably far better than I actually can, and so it is very important for me to at
Ah.
least once per day to show my best moves. I
Right.
encourage people to play their favorite, playlist in the background, and honestly, if you tap your foot or you start, moving your head, that is healing.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
is healing. Just those small
Mhm.
movements that get us out of the ruts, that's really
Yeah.
how I ground myself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That's great. Really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Annalisa,
so
anything else? Uh,
no, this has been such a delight. I
yeah.
appreciate your living lusciousness.
Right.
It's just,
Thank you.
what, I think I live like you, and also I forget that it is such a delight to be alive and not
Yeah.
always thinking about death and dying 'cause
Yes.
and you brought a poem to share. You wanna talk about that?
I do. At my father's, funeral service, they noted the Dash poem, and if you haven't ever read it, I encourage you to check it out. But the short version is that when you die, when your tombstone is a birth date and a death date.
Mm.
But the thing that matters most is the dash in between. And to my
Oh, yeah.
mother's dismay, I did get a tattoo on that says, "Live the dash" on my wrist, and I believe that, and, I try to every day just make sure that I am living to the fullest, and
Mhm.
that is so impactful for me. So that is my motto is "Live the dash," and I really do
Mm.
try to encourage
Huh.
others to do the same. And check out the Dash poem, it will absolutely change your life.
Do you
We'll,
wanna read a portion of it?
Absolutely. It's so beautiful.
and we'll put it in the podcast notes too.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of her birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that
Mm.
dash represents all the time that she spent on earth, alive on earth, and now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So
Mm.
think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could
Mm.
just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel. And be less
Mhm.
quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a while. So when your eulogy's being read with your life's actions to rehash, what would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. All right. I love it. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you
that.
so much,
Yeah.
Ashley.
It's been a real pleasure, and we look forward to learning more about your work. Maybe you'll show
Mhm.
up in one of our towns at one point.
That
Yeah.
would be amazing. Thank y'all so much for having me.
The longest conversations about the end of life.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.